Everybody on booktube was right. Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry is an absolute masterpiece. There's a reason why it won the Pulitzer Prize in 1986. There's a reason why it's a booktube darling. There's a reason why it's popular on Book Talk. It's popular on every bookish community online around the world. Lonesome Dove is one of those books that has just received universal acclaim, and for good reason. If I'm being honest, I did not think Lonesome Dove was going to be for me. I knew it was a masterpiece before starting the story. I knew it was going to emotionally affect me. But I've never been a reader of Westerns. I can count on one hand the amount of Westerns that I have read, including Lonesome Dove. And I just thought Westerns was not a genre I was interested in. But I think Lonesome Dove might have changed that. I really feel like I was primed to be underwhelmed with this book. I'm a bit of a hipster. I'm a bit of a hater. But I'm happy to say, with Lonesome Dove, I could find nothing that I hated. There were a few stylistic choices. There were a few plot elements, a few storylines that I feel like the story could have done without, but they in no way made the story worse, but just perhaps a little longer than it needed to be. This book is very slow-paced. I was telling my friends, 'cause I was reading this book along with my book club, that this really is the killer of TBRs. You cannot binge Lonesome Dove. If you want to read any other books at the same time as this amazing novel, you're going to be very disappointed. This book demands your full attention. It demands that you slowly digest the story. I could never read more than 100 pages in one day, and generally I read several hundreds of pages over the weekend. I could not do that with Lonesome Dove. But even though the plot was very glacial, very slow moving, I did not mind that Larry McMurtry was taking his time. At first glance, Lonesome Dove doesn't seem particularly special. The premise is very basic. It's something we've all seen before. We follow the Hat Creek outfit as they're transporting thousands of cattle from Lonesome Dove, Texas, across the American West. Nothing too groundbreaking about that premise. But what is absolutely top-notch, high-level, S-tier about Lonesome Dove is the characterization. I am very much a characters first type of reader. I don't care how engaging the plot is. I don't care how beautiful the prose is. I don't care about the amazing world building. If I don't care about the characters, I will not be emotionally invested in the story. If I'm not emotionally invested in the story, it's not great to me. If it's not going to stick with me years after I finish the book, I don't think that's a story that I would consider 5 out of 5 stars, great, monumental, a need to read type of book. Lonesome Dove is one of those books. There's a reason why after I finished it, it easily slid into my top 5 favorite books of all time, and it's because of the amazing characters. Because I know I'm not the only characters first reader out there, if you have any recommendations for some books with amazing characters that you've never forgotten, please leave them in the comments below. I'm always looking for recommendations. I want to meet more amazing imaginary figures. Lonesome Dove will make you feel manly. It'll make you want to do difficult, arduous tasks. It'll make you want to go outside and lasso wild animals. It'll make you want to shoot guns, fight Indians, go on an adventure. And I never thought that Westerns were for me. I grew up in Las Vegas, a very urban area, not a lot of wildlife. I never once dreamed of being a cowboy. I wanted to be a ninja. I wanted to be a samurai. I wanted to be a knight. I wanted to be an astronaut, like a lot of young men do. But I never wanted to be a cowboy. Never resonated with me. But now, after reading Lonesome Dove, being a cowboy sounds pretty cool. My friends who were reading this book along with me all had a very similar reaction. I definitely think Lonesome Dove is a man's book. It's a book for boys. Not to say that women won't enjoy this book. I'm sure most women will still love Lonesome Dove. But I think Lonesome Dove is definitely male fiction. I would definitely categorize it as that. And why I think so many men resonate so strongly with this story is because there is a plethora, an absolute abundance of amazing male role models in Lonesome Dove. Lonesome Dove has multiple POV characters, and you really get to see the world through their eyes. One of these POV characters is young Newt. Newt is a 17-year-old young man who's going on his first cattle drive. Newt is a very special character because he was raised without his parents. His mother died when he was very young, and he never knew his father. But he's always been surrounded by all these older, accomplished men. And he sees these men as a bunch of surrogate father figures. He looks up to these men. He wants to be like them. But because they're not his dad, and because they have their own lives to live, he's constantly chasing after approval. He's constantly unsure of himself. He's not sure how to navigate the world. He's not sure who he should be emulating. And I resonated so strongly with that because I remember being a young man because my father wasn't in the picture. And when I was a teenager, from the ages of like 11 to 17, I was really looking for older male role model figures. And when you're a teenager, you're going to go through a bunch of different personality changes. You're a different person when you're 12, 13, 14, 15, constantly changing at that age. And Newt, watching him go on this journey and seeing him admire this character and then this character and really see him grow to find out who he is was amongst the best experiences of reading Lonesome Dove. It seems to me that in the present day, a lot of men are starved for positive, strong male role models. And if you're one of those people, I really think you will love Lonesome Dove, especially because of that aspect of the story. One of the main complaints I've encountered about Lonesome Dove is how prevalent the male gaze is throughout the story. It can be very annoying. Essentially, there are so few women in this plot that whenever the men that are on this cattle drive encounter women, they're falling instantly in love. They're always talking about women. They're always like whining. They're always simping. The women that are constantly throughout the story, they're always having to like ignore and rebuff a lot of the advances the men make towards them. And that did get repetitive throughout the book. I could see why that's very annoying to some readers, especially some of the women readers that have shed light on this more annoying aspect of Lonesome Dove. Personally, I found this to be one of the more realistic aspects of the novel. My friend group in high school, there was like 11 of us guys, and there was 2 girls. And all the guys fell in love with the girls. I was immune because I was related to them, but I got to see how closeness leads to intimacy, and intimacy leads to emotional and like romantic feelings. And if you're in the American West, where the ratio of men to women is so out of whack, and you encounter an attractive, beautiful, compelling woman, you're going to fall in love. It's just market forces. These women are so valuable in this story to the men. These women are one of a kind, and these men just don't know how to deal with them. They're simping, they're whining, they're heartbroken for no reason. A lot of them are imagining relationships that really don't exist. It just exists in their imagination. They're just hoping and wishing for that. And it is annoying, especially in the case of July and Dish, the constant mooning and simping and complaining and reflection about these romantic feelings, about this angst, got very repetitive and very annoying. But we all know that one friend from high school who was in love with a girl, and those feelings were not reciprocated, and it became their entire personality. So if 2 out of the 20 plus named male characters are just consumed with being rebuffed by women, I feel like that's a pretty accurate ratio compared to real life. One of the amazing things about the characterization in Lonesome Dove that Larry McMurtry pulled off masterfully is just how human all the characters are. Even the most amazing, most admirable characters in this narrative have some great personality flaws, some great traumas that they aren't doing a good job with coping with. And just seeing the way that all these traumatized, strange men navigate the world, where their value systems came from, what they're running away from, and seeing how, despite these weaknesses, they still grow to become men worthy of admiration, men worthy of respect. It was just so grounded, so real, so human. The best characters in this book will make you super angry, and the worst characters in this book will make you feel great feelings of admiration and respect at different times in the narrative. And I feel like that's just incredibly lifelike. That's so realistic. One of the main experiences we all go through growing up is realizing that our heroes are not perfect. And we get to see that happen so many times throughout Lonesome Dove. but it's done in a way that isn't damning. There's no condemnation of the weaknesses of these men. It's just recognizing the fact that these men aren't perfect and loving them anyway and growing to respect them despite their weaknesses and their shortcomings. And even though at the end of this book, I did not like the character arcs of all the characters in the book, I really feel like this book really proves the adage that if you knew everything about an individual, you couldn't help but love them. Because even the characters that annoyed me, that I did not care for in the first 300 pages of this book, I found myself emotionally connected to them at the end of this book. And that's a very impressive feat that Larry McMurtry was able to pull off. Stephen King is my favorite author, and Lonesome Dove is Stephen King's favorite novel. That is the main reason why it was on my list of 25 books to read in 2025. I wanted to see how Stephen King's favorite book possibly influenced his writing style. And let me just tell you, the influence this book had on Stephen King is very noticeable. Stephen King and Larry McMurtry in this book, they do something that is frustrating, but is so special that a lot of authors are scared of doing. They introduce you to a character, they make you love this character, they tell you every detail about this character's life, they make you feel so much empathy and love for a character. And then they're introducing you to different storylines and plot lines, and they're foreshadowing things that you could definitely see happening on the horizon, and you're filled with hope. And then the authors kill off these characters in brutal ways, traumatizing ways, and the reader's just left feeling empty and heartbroken. Lonesome Dove is truly an emotional roller coaster. I would be laughing out loud one page and then crying the next page. It would give you emotional whiplash. And at first, it was very frustrating because it's cool when you're prepared for those types of tragedies. But I was not anticipating just how tragic and brutal Lonesome Dove was going to be at times. But it's very realistic because life on the American West was brutal and difficult and painful and arduous. And everyone that has lived to adulthood in Lonesome Dove, they are filled with trauma. And a lot of them are suffering from PTSD. And Larry McMurtry does a very good job at portraying mental illness in the context of this time in a way that is very relatable to people in the present day. All these flawed, damaged, broken, hurt people are just figuring out ways to cope with the troubles and challenges and trials of life on the American West. There is no perfect, idyllic, romanticized existence in the American West before civilization really got, its foothold there. I love the way that McMurtry was able to make the reader think about this contrast between the beautiful and the brutal, and how this contrast is reflected in the point of view and values of Woodrow Call and Gus McCrae. Woodrow Call is a workaholic. He's not happy unless he is doing something difficult and hard and important. And Gus McCrae, he loves the simple things. He loves to live life at a slow pace. He loves to wake up early and watch the sunset. He appreciates the grandeur of nature, while Woodrow Call doesn't understand why Gus McCrae sees life in such a romanticized way. He wants results. He wants ambition. He wants action. And that contrast between Gus McCrae and Woodrow Call was one of my favorite aspects of Lonesome Dove, because never does Larry McMurtry tell the reader where they should stand on this spectrum between romanticized idealism of nature and seeing nature as this brutal, difficult thing that needs to be conquered. He lets the reader make up their own minds. And I appreciate that because I can see the value of both Woodrow Call's point of view and Gus McCrae. And that's a very interesting thing I think a lot of people will dwell on, and a lot of people will think about when they read Lonesome Dove. I loved the character interactions. I loved the dialogue. I loved the nicknames. I loved the drama. I loved the tensions. I loved the trolling and the pranking. It was just so lifelike, so relatable. Lonesome Dove made me nostalgic for the times when I was a teenager. And me and my friends were just doing something, whether it be going to a sports event or playing board games or watching a movie or going to a school dance. and the way we would interact with each other, how we gave each other nicknames, how we made fun of each other in a way that wasn't critical, how you have these dramas and these tensions, and then it all comes to a head, and then the next moment you're totally fine. It was a wonderful time to be alive when I was a young man, when I was a teenager. And the way Larry McMurtry was able to capture the essence of boyhood and young manhood was just so nice. It was so bittersweet because you're happy to grow up, you're happy to be advancing in life, but you always are going to hold on to the precious memories, the precious experiences of your young adulthood and your boyhood and your teenage years. And Larry McMurtry really had me dwelling about my upbringing, about high school and middle school, in a way that was just tender and precious. I'm a crier when it comes to literature. Great books make me cry, but I cried 4 times during Lonesome Dove, which is well above the average. A little bit of spoilers without context, so if you haven't read this book, you're not going to be spoiled by what I'm talking about. I cried during the snake scene. I cried during the anger management with the anvil scene. I cried during the making of the headstone. That one got me. And I cried during You Just Missed Him. He was just here. Those scenes had me weeping. One of the main philosophical themes that I loved about Lonesome Dove was man's search for meaning. Whether or not you believe in an innate and inherent meaning to life, every individual has to decide for themselves what they're going to live their life for, what they're going to focus on when the going gets tough, when trials and tribulations are thrown in their path, what they're going to put their faith in. And it was just beautiful and emotional to see how all these different characters cope with the struggles and tragedies of their lives. Because this book has a plethora of tragedies throughout. You hear about the backstories of all these characters, and you can't help but love them. You can't help but admire them. You can't help but be inspired by the way, by what they decided to focus on, and what they decided to center their lives on so that they can endure this hard life. And that's just something I feel like anybody can relate to. If you are alive in the year 2025, you've encountered hardships, you've encountered tragedies, and you've asked yourself, what's the point of all this? Why should I keep enduring? Why should I struggle through this existence? It's very existential, but Larry McMurtry really makes the reader think about these things. I'm not sure if my point is getting across, but that's what I was focusing on. That's what I kept returning to while reading this amazing book. Catharsis is a very big thing for me, and the ending of Lonesome Dove, I have mixed feelings about it. I really feel like parts 1 and 2 was a completely different story than part 3. And I feel like the climax of part 3 was amazing, very compelling. And I really love the prolonged falling action sequence. I love a long falling action sequence. I love having the time to get settled into the ending of a story. But the last 3 pages of Lonesome Dove are the worst 3 pages of Lonesome Dove. The story ends so abruptly, and there's plenty of things the reader's wondering about. And we don't get the answer to those questions, and that was incredibly frustrating. I don't like it when a book kind of takes away that catharsis from the reader. I'm okay with ambiguous or tragic endings, but catharsis is so important to me, and Lonesome Dove did not have a cathartic ending. I had no sense of catharsis upon completing this book. I remember when I read the last chapter, I was convinced that that couldn't be the last chapter. I kept scrolling, then I got to the acknowledgments and the about author, and I realized that the book was over, and it just ended on that point. And I hate when a book does not give me a feeling of catharsis. So I'm definitely going to have to be finishing this quartet of novels by Larry McMurtry before the end of the year, because I need to see how the story goes. I need to understand exactly everything that happened. I'm going to read the prequels. I'm going to read Streets of Pareto and finish up this story because, dang it, this book is so hard to binge. You have to take your time reading it, and then you finish it, and you know you're just going to have to subject yourself to another slow masterpiece, and that's what I'm prepared to do. So, was Lonesome Dove worth it? That is a resounding yes, even though I found the ending to be very underwhelming, very not cathartic. The journey up to that point was worth it. And there's 4 books in this story, and I'm going to finish it before the end of 2025. This is not my favorite book, but it is amongst my favorite books. If you want to watch a book review video for my favorite book of all time, Blackwater by Michael McDowell, it should be somewhere on the screen, maybe in the pinned comment. Who knows? Thank you guys for watching.